Hello.
friends! Time for another What We Read video where we try to quickly talk about the books that we've read recently.
I'll try to be brief.
I'll try to be brief. Okay.
Here we go.
I'm going to kick things off by talking about a book that has long been on my TBR, but I finally read it this year. I actually buddy read it with my friend Kristen from Super Space Chick, and that book is Mistborn: The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson.
That's right.
Guys, I read my first Brandon Sanderson book.
It was great.
Shocker. And I had the inkling that I was going to enjoy Mistborn, but I actually really enjoyed it more than I even expected to. So, The Final Empire, which is the first book in the trilogy, is essentially almost a heist story / revolution story. Like, it's like this weird mix of that. It's set in a world where basically the dictator has won. There is this group of people who have abilities called Mistborns. They're usually noble, but there's some of them who are not. There is a particular Mistborn who decides that he is going to spearhead this rebellion, and he gathers all the people he needs in order to make this happen. It's just very enjoyable. I'm a sucker for stories where there's like a group of characters and they have a common goal and they're all like very distinctive personalities, and that's exactly what you get in this story. The specific leads that you've got are Vin and Kel. I want to say Kel is the one who puts the entire group together. He's like that leader who he won't tell you everything,
plan.
But he has it. Like, he knows what he's doing. And then you have Vin, who is like an orphan that his path crosses with hers, and he discovers that she's just like him. And so she starts getting ingratiated into this world of using her ability, which she didn't know she had. And then she also starts feeling like these people are her family, which she's also never really had. And she has trust issues for reasons. But yeah, it's really good. I enjoyed it. I think the weakest part of it is probably this whole little romantic overture that's going on. Not necessary, but it's fine. It's fine, but it's not necessary. Otherwise, the plot is really interesting to me because it didn't actually play out the way I thought it would. The entire time the thing happens at the end, we weren't, but that was my reaction to this, which is why I was I don't know where it's gonna go now because of what happens. Maki hasn't actually finished it yet, which is why I'm being semi-vague about it. But it's one of those stories where I thought for sure it was going one way and it didn't, and that surprised me in a good way. So I am eagerly anticipating the next, although I'm not too keen on the romance, like I said.
Plus the lore is pretty awesome in that the people with the abilities here base their abilities on how much types of metals they can consume.
Yeah, there's 11.
Yeah, and so when they consume a certain metal, they can do things like
Specific
leap and
things.
Jump and pull themselves forward and backwards, control people's minds. It's kind of
cancel out other people's
abilities,
it's
and all cool. Based on how much you ingest. So that's kind of cool.
The next book I read, I actually won in a giveaway from the author, and that book is The Austen Playbook by Lucy Parker, and this is the 4th book in her London Celebrity series. The love interest is a Slytherin, and the main character is a Hufflepuff, and it's basically that combination.
The internet has celebrated that kind of pairing for years. It's a long time coming, honestly.
So in this one, the main character she's pursuing a career path in serious dramatic theater when really she wants to be doing musicals and more lighthearted fare.
There's the puff.
Which is totally understandable because that's how I feel too. Anyway, she signs on to do this one big live TV event where it's called the Austen Playbook, and essentially the viewers can vote for what happens next. So it's watching all these Austen characters come together from all of her work, and it's a murder mystery, and so you decide what goes next. And so it's actually a very intriguing project in that it's a challenge to all the performers because they have to memorize all of these different scripts. It's also one of those things where you don't know what's going to happen in this story. And so it's going to be staged at this small theater that belongs to a very well-known theater-related family as well. The owner of the estate where this theater is actually is the Slytherin character. He is a critic. He's a theater critic.
Of course he is.
And he has criticized Hufflepuff. I'm just going to call him Slytherin Hufflepuff for the rest of this review. He criticizes the Hufflepuff's performance, and because he knows that she doesn't have her heart in some of these more serious roles that she's done, and he can kind of tell that. And so their paths cross and sparks fly, but also there's a deep family scandal that involves both of them. So fun times.
Very much so.
It's really cute. It is still not my favorite of the London Celebrity series, but I definitely think it ranks up there with my second favorite, which is Making Up. But it's just fun because I am a sucker for Slytherin Hufflepuff romance, and it's just fun because he's so grumpy and he's so icy, and then she's bubbly and I'm a Hufflepuff. I like being cozy and comfortable. You know what
Basically
I mean?
our marriage.
Yes, which is probably why I enjoyed it, but also was I've seen this in my real life, so I'm good. So
Next,
we have a series ender, and that's Finale by Stephanie Garber. This is the third and final book in the Caraval series.
Caraval.
And it wraps up the story of Sister Scarlet and Tella and their involvement with Caraval, which is a magical traveling show, circus, performance type thing. And the Caraval Master, whose name is Legend. I can't exactly tell you what the plot is because it would spoil the rest of the books in the series, but suffice to say that both sisters have now come to a point where they're going to need to make big life choices. And these big life choices will affect both not only their lives in the future, but the lives of everyone in this world. So, very big and important stuff. I will say that I do think the one thing that made this book like less than a 5-star for me is just because I missed the idea of the actual Caraval performance happening. That was what was magical to me about the first 2 books, and we don't actually have that happen here because there are other things at stake, obviously. But the whimsy is still there, the magic is still there, and you kind of get a bigger idea of the allure in this world, which is interesting and fun. And the 2 sisters, you get both their viewpoints this time, which is really great. And the swoons are still there. I also did a lot of screaming at some point because there was like this thing that happens that I was just like, you can't do that! You can't just whip that out of... I mean, you can, but also, like, you can't do that! It was an emotional roller coaster. And I almost didn't want it to end, but I'm glad it did because I don't think my heart could have stood anymore. So, it was very enjoyable, very fun. Would definitely recommend this and the rest of the series. I have one more to talk about for this section, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, which I received an early copy of thanks to Gallery Books. It is a fun Christina Lauren read. Christina Lauren are known for their romances, and lately they've been gearing towards romantic comedy / more, you know, women's fiction type romances, and this one kind of is no exception to that. The Unhoneymooners has the, like, most rom-commiest premise ever, because at her twin sister's wedding, everyone gets food poisoned. So Olive is told by her sister that she needs to go on the honeymoon that her sister has won so that it doesn't go to waste, and she ends up having to go with someone she hates, the older brother of the groom, who also happens to be the best man, named Ethan. And so they go on this vacation to Hawaii. They have to pretend to be a married couple because, you know, that's who won the prize. And while they are there, they run into people from their own lives that they have to pretend to be a married couple in front of. Of course, eventually it stops being pretend because they develop feelings for each other. Okay, obviously, romantic comedy premise means it's a little out there, but it's also just so fun to read. I think one of the things I have always enjoyed about Christina and Lauren and their work is that they're so good at writing characters who have chemistry. And that's exactly what carries the story for this one, because Olive and Ethan have undeniable chemistry. It's so good. I will say, like, the drama in this one is not my favorite. I do feel like it makes sense, but also, like, really, why that? Why does that have to be the dramatic turning point of this story that forces our pair apart, you know? But all in all, still a very fun Christina Lauren read. Still would recommend checking it out. Alright, Mackie Stern. I believe he is now going to go into his comments on comics.
Well, and one digital kind of read that I had. I want to give a shout out to 3 single issues that I really sort of appreciate. Starting with a throwback to a very, very old issue of The Brave and the Bold, prior to the New 52, prior to the DC Rebirth even, where I think The Brave and the Bold just basically took random superheroes and put them in like single arc stories per issue. Okay. And this particular issue is a closed story between Wonder Woman, Zatanna, and Batgirl, where Zatanna,
interesting combo.
It's an interesting combo because Zatanna sort of wakes up and sees a terrible prophecy involving one of the superheroes of the community. Okay. She picks up the phone, well, in Zatanna fashion, just shows up on a wall randomly in front of Wonder Woman after a heist, and she's like, Diana, we have to do something, and we have to do something tonight. And Diana's like, all right, fine. Cut to Gotham, where Batgirl has, you know, kicked so much ass, and as she's hightailing it out of there with her in her Batcycle is hijacked by Diana in mid-flight, and she's like, huh, what's happening? She looks, sort of peers underneath the cycle, and Diana's like, get your dancing shoes, we're partying tonight. And a huge party ensues because Zatanna actually saw a little bit of Babs's future and says, I just want to give her one good memory. And Diana, being Diana and always on the nose with no subtlety whatsoever, is just like, do you know what oracles are? Oracles are information brokers. They aren't just people who know the future. They know what's going on. And Babs is like, that's a great idea. Anyway, my shoes are tired. Good night, everybody. And so So that was a great buddy cop kind of downtime thing with these three heroines, and highly recommend to anybody who can get it. It's issue 33 of the book, published in like June 2010. Another individual series would be Iceman and His Amazing Friends. That's actually Iceman issue 3.
Okay.
It's an allusion to, and this is, I'm dating myself, if people remember Spider-Man His Amazing Friends, it was actually one of the first superhero TV cartoons that came out featuring Iceman and Firestar and Spider-Man going on adventures. So that's Jessica, Bobby, and Peter just hanging out. Now this one, we haven't seen them team up, I think, in a very long time, if at all, and usually just the last time on TV. And the premise is Peter is on a date with Mary Jane, Bobby is on a date with somebody he's swiped left or right, I forget.
Swipe
I don't know.
left.
It's whatever passes for Grinder on in the X universe. And then Jessica is also sort of on a date, and their dates, all of them, are interrupted when something terrible happens, and they basically team up and commiserate about how hard it is to be in a relationship while being a superhero. So, as you see from the cover, it is absolutely glorious, red, white, and blue, because that's their thing. And lastly, Shuri issue 1, where Shuri has died and been revived and now has weird, crazy, supernatural Wakandan powers, and launches T'Challa out into space to do some adventures, and T'Challa hasn't been heard from in 2 weeks. And now, in true Wakandan fashion, the women have gathered in times of trouble, which they haven't done enough, and Queen Ramonda's like, they haven't seen T'Challa in a while, you're the only one left, can you be the Black Panther again? And I am so there for that. So highly recommend Shuri number 1. I would kill to see Letitia do like anything Shuri moving forward. Hey, maybe there's a character that we should have put in our Avengers tag. But then again, she has her own comic, so how can she not have her own spotlight with her own comic? Skipping that, I have read the entirety of the Lock and Key series.
Oh yeah.
Which is a story about a bunch of kids and their mom who move into an old manor owned by their dad's family, who had passed away, was murdered actually, terribly, in a terrible fashion, where they find several keys that do insane things. So a key, once put into the right door, anybody who walks through it, their spirit leaves their body, and their body looks like it's dead, but their spirit can actually wander.
Not creepy at all.
Not creepy in any way, form, or fashion. There's sort of the key that if you insert it into the back of somebody's neck, you get to see what's in their head, and you can take things out or put things back in.
Again, not creepy at all?
Not creepy at all. But then again, what can you expect from Joe Hill, right? The apple did not fall far from that tree. Can you say Stephen King? I can
only imagine how they grew up.
I have some insight to that thanks to On Writing, and it was kind of cool because Stephen would actually pay them to record, well, I knew his daughter did it, to pay them to record audiobooks. Like they would read books and speak into a cassette tape, and that's what Stephen would listen to when he would be driving. Which is kind of really cool. That's a great way to earn a buck as a kid. But they did a magnificent job. All 6 issues plus Heaven and Hell. Is it Heaven and Hell? Yeah, Heaven and Earth. Sorry. Plus the 7th sort of compilation, Heaven and Earth, where they were collected sort of mini vignettes. The mystery behind how these keys came to be. What does it have to do with their family? And what do they do now that something terrible and evil is out to subvert and use the keys for their own nefarious plans? Is, I think, one of the best writing we've had in a very long time.
Yeah.
Highly recommend to anybody who loves it. The last book I want to talk about, I got it on Kindle, is the Dragon Rider Legacies Book 3, Legend by Nicole Conway. It is set 40 years after the events of her first quartet of books about David Broadfeather, who was half elf, half human, and decides to save the entire kingdom. Crazy things happen. 40 years later, the kingdom is in trouble again, and this time the main characters are the kids of one of the characters from the first cycle, and it is such a satisfying end to a next cycle series. I hear there's more coming, that they're facing off against a different kind of threat involving different sort of gods, and they're still dragon riders, and the main character in this one is Princess Jenna, who is one of the best, most powerful dragon riders sort of in this era. That's refreshing. Well, and she's not afraid of being a woman, she's not afraid of being dainty. She has some issues thinking maybe her dad doesn't approve of it, but then, you know, that gets resolved as well. And to suddenly have Javid, spoiler, and his legacy sort of taken into question and consideration, whilst at the same time having new lore added to it. I think it's great. Pick it up if you like dragons. and like just dragons. So
ooh, that's a good subcategory for a recommendations video. Books with dragons.
Books with dragons in it, right? So
can't wait.
Exactly, and so I highly recommend the Dragon Rider Legacy series. It's just 3 books, definitely easier to crunch through than the 4-book first part. But you can't really appreciate it as much if you don't read the first 4 books, because there's so much of the
should just read everything and read 7 books.
Pretty much 7, yes, and then enjoy the rest of it. It's on its way, and that's pretty much me. I'm done.
Alright, the next book I'm going to talk about is one that I got thanks to HarperCollins, so thank you for that. It is The Beholder by Anna Bright. The Beholder is about a character whose stepmother doesn't particularly like her, so she ends up being sent off to find someone to marry. There's a list of potential suitors that she has to meet, and there's like 5 or 6 of them on this list, and so Sela, who's the main character, is gonna go on this journey on a ship called the Beholder with a crew that her stepmother has hired. And so the book covers the first 2 stops of her suitor tour. It's so simple plot-wise. The author takes a lot of influence from fairy tales and classic literary stories, or mythology even, and weaves them into her story. So for me, like, it is sort of entertaining to see them pop up here and there, but at the same time, I'm not always entirely sure like what is actually meant to be a reference and what is just something that I thought was a reference because I know something literary connected to that thing, like the name of a place, the name of a person, the detail, anything like that. So it's a little confusing in terms of like the world itself and how it's set up. I also found it a little bit all over the place for the world to have like names I recognize for countries, like, or places, like Potomac is there. I think they say England in it, and I think they say Europe in it, or maybe they refer to it slightly differently, but it was a little confusing because I'm like, is it supposed to be not a fantasy world and it's a real world, stuff like that. But otherwise it was okay. I think Sela is she kind of comes across as your typical fantasy heroine at first, like fairy tale fantasy heroine I should say, where like most of the older fairy tales, classic fairy tales, have females who don't get a lot of agency, like they literally just have things happen to them, and Sela sort of has that same thing, even though she's very capable and has grown up doing things outside of like the normal things you would expect, like a princess or a seneschal elect, which is what she is. Seneschal elect to do.
Very nice, very snazzy. I like it. I would like a sense.
So yeah, so she gets to meet her first 2 potential suitors, forms relationships with them. I'm not going to go into too much spoilers because I don't want you guys to not be taken off guard by things, but I will say, like, for me, I don't know, it just ended up not being something that really hooked me right away, and it was also kind of because I was a little bit, like, confused by the world itself and stuff, and I wasn't overly enticed by this whole plot. Like, there's an underlying plot that is not anything to do with the romance and stuff, but the romance is such a big part of it, and like it just didn't entice me in the way that I would have liked it to, so kind of mixed bag on that one. It was fine, nothing too special. It's fine. The next book is a graphic novel, and it is Bloom, which is by Kevin Panetta and Savannah Ganesho, and it is essentially about a boy named Ari, and his family owns a bakery in their small town, and his parents kind of, especially his dad, expects him to take over the family business, but Ari, being a very stubborn young adult, is determined to like be in a band and move away from town and be with his friends, and so he's pushing for that, and so he ends up hiring a new baker to hopefully, you know, take over the job for him and stuff like that. But what he doesn't expect is that he'll end up becoming friends with this one and then maybe something more. So what I like about this one is that it's a graphic novel that is both visually appealing, like the illustration style is very cute, it's delightful, and the coloring is also very delightful because everything is in shades of blue. And I like the story of it too because Ari is basically on the cusp of making a big life choice and seeing how that plays out. And I like the characters in it too, especially, like, I enjoyed Ari, but like his family is great, some of his friends are great, and like it's fun. What I did not necessarily love is that the way that things are pushed to the climax is very quickly done. It happens within like the last like 4th, 6th of the book, so there's very little page time to resolve something that they've been building up to for so long. And I think if this has been split maybe into 2 parts, it would have been even better, I think, because you'd have more time to see it and more time to see the fallout too before you get the recovery. But in this one, it was kind of just like, climax, fallout, recovery. so it felt a little bit rushed. But other than that, it was very cute and I enjoyed it a lot. The next one is also something I enjoyed a lot, and I have an early copy thanks to Penguin Teen. It is Wicked Fox by Cat Cho. And this one is basically the same kind of urban fantasy that, you know, the Shadowhunter series is, except that it's set in Seoul and it has Korean mythology.
Nice.
So much fun. Okay.
It's a good Gumiho in there, I'm sure.
Yes. The main character is named Myung. She is a half human, half Gumiho. Oh, I mean, she technically just comes across as a full Gumiho because she has the full range of abilities that a Gumiho has, but she has a human father. One night, she rescues this human boy from dying from an attack by some supernatural creature, which I shall not name, and she ends up losing her fox bead, which is what gives her all of her abilities, and it's basically her life force in the process. And so then one of the big main through lines is that she's trying to find a way to put the fox bead back where it's supposed to be. At the same time, she's struggling with the fact that she, unlike other supernatural creatures, like there's a part of her that longs to be human and have a normal life, and so she's also trying to make sense of that. And this one is so much fun. Like, I love it in the way that I love the early Cassandra Clare books, where I'm like, it's just so entertaining. You have this whole supernatural world set against this normal everyday life in Seoul. Like, it's just so fun for me to see like how they put all of these things in, like inserted them as if they were just a normal part of everyday life in Seoul. So that was great. I love getting to know Myung because I think any character that faces a conflict that difficult and in age so young is always fascinating to read about, because like you haven't lived long enough to have all of the experience that would maybe help you make your decision easier. And even if you have lived that long, it doesn't even guarantee that. Yeah, and it's just such an interesting conflict because for her, she equates one side to being evil and terrible, and she equates the other side to being like only a dream that's so far out of her grasp. And it's just so interesting. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of the romance that develops in this one. I wouldn't say that. Like, they have such great moments, and I like their friendship. The romance, I'm not sure about yet, but this is a series, so there is time for it to sort of develop. The cast of characters was very enjoyable, and I did like the setting, and I did like the mythology. It ends really well, and it could have actually worked as a standalone, but there is also something that happens that kind of leaves it open for maybe something else happening, so looking forward to that. And the very last book I talk about is actually one of my favorite books that I have read in this entire year, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is historical fiction, but with a twist. And the twist is that it is being told to the reader through the lens of the Greek gods, specifically Aphrodite, who kicks off the story, because it is two different love stories set against the backdrop of World War I and World War II.
Crazy.
It is just like, I didn't know what to make of the premise when I first heard of this book, so I was kind of like, I don't know if that'll... But holy shit, it works! Like, I don't know I don't know how she did it, but Julie Berry literally just, like, pulls this out, and I'm just like, okay, I accept this, and it is so well done. So, the beginning of the book is basically Hephaestus catching Aphrodite, his wife, and her paramour at the time, Ares, in a golden net. Because he's Hephaestus. And so he wants to bring them on trial to Olympus, so the other gods can help judge the situation, their infidelity, actually. But Aphrodite convinces him that, they should have their own council, like they can talk it out and stuff like that. And their whole discussion at first is just about this situation. One isolated incident. It eventually comes to the point where they're discussing Aphrodite's role as a goddess. Because everyone else seems to have, like, a very concrete, like, role in, like, the things in the world. And it's a role with lasting effects and, like, It's a little more, it's less nebulous. She is trying to explain her contribution to things and her position and how it makes her feel. And so she illustrates this by talking about two different love stories. And holy crap, it's so good! Like, I actually listened to the audiobook for this. It's a full cast audio. Every god gets their own narrator. And the human characters who exchange letters at some point also get their own narrators. So it's like this whole thing where it's like being acted out for you, and it's so incredibly done. I love the love stories. I love the relationships and the friendships and the family. I love the relationships between the gods too, because it's so interesting. She calls on some other gods to show up later on and tell their parts in the story, and it's so beautiful. A common thread that is woven into the story is not just love and the influence of the gods, but it's also music. And for someone who appreciates music, like, I don't even love it as much as other people love it, but appreciating it was enough for me to feel so connected to that part of this story as well. And it's so wonderful. I want more people to pick this up, so you definitely should. So good. So we have now come to the end of this What We Read. If you have read any of these books or are interested in any of these books, we'd love to know. And you could also let us know what you're reading, or if you have any recommendations based on the ones that we basically gushed about.
That's right.
Alright, we will see you guys with another video very soon.
Bye.